They said the retirement home would be temporary, so I let them drive me there with my overnight bag and a smile. That afternoon, using the facility's guest Wi-Fi and a plan I had kept quiet for weeks, I moved my house, my accounts, and my future out of their reach. That evening, when they pulled up with a rental truck and champagne to Kristen, their new life in my living room, their keys did not work, and the detective on my porch asked a single question that made my daughter drop her glass: who forged my name? Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. My name is Walter Pierce. I am 76 years old, a retired public school principal, and a grandfather to 2 children who still draw me pictures of lopsided houses with smoke coming out of the chimney. On my refrigerator, Lucy's crayon chimney has puffed 3 perfect circles for months, taped beside Sam's stick figure with a cape that he insists is me. In the mornings I make oatmeal and talk to them about spelling words and worm races after rain. On Sundays, when the light comes in sideways through the dining room windows, I set out the good plates Helen liked and we play restaurant, because Lucy likes to take orders with a pencil behind her ear. 3 months ago, my daughter, Elise, slid a new word into that house like a sliver under skin: burden. It arrived soft as cotton at first: "Dad, it is just too much for you to keep up the house alone, we worry about you," and then hardened when her husband, Nick, began stopping by to help. Help looked like this: a toolbox on my driveway and compliments sweet enough to rot a fence post. Nick was all teeth and praise. He loved my crown molding and my original oak floors, the banister that gleams where Helen's hand wore it smooth, the back deck that looks over the creek where we used to float sticks after summer storms. He loved to say equity the way a man says the name of a boat he plans to sail. He calibrated his admiration like a thermostat, 2 degrees warmer whenever a neighbor walked by. He asked what I had paid for the place in 1987 and shook his head like a man hearing a ghost story. He talked about unlocking value. He asked where I kept the ladder and then measured my windows with the loose posture of someone already shopping for drapes. The more Nick visited, the more my bills went missing. A statement I had left on the kitchen table would migrate to Elisa's purse. The insurance premium I had tucked into the blue folder near the phone simply vanished. The mailman must be inconsistent, Elise said with a little laugh, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear while Nick traced the carved edge of my grandfather clock with 2 fingers, as if checking the wood for a price he could live with. When I reached for my spare keys in the bowl by the door, the bowl was empty. Elise had borrowed them for emergencies. When I asked for them back, she frowned, the kind of frown that suggests disappointment more than refusal, and said she would put them somewhere safe. There were small corrections to my life, all under the banner of care. Elise lowered my thermostat because drafts are bad for you, then raised an eyebrow when I wore a sweater inside and called me stubborn. She reorganized my pillbox so it is less confusing, and then told me on the phone that I had mixed up Tuesday and Thursday, which I had not. She bought a set of pail coasters for water rings, set them out like little rules, and then sighed when I put my coffee mug down on the wood because Helen and I never used coasters and somehow the table had survived. There was a new family calendar that lived on Elisa's phone, a shared universe of color-coded events that I could not see but was expected to obey. "We put your checkup on Wednesday," she would say. "We scheduled a walkthrough on Friday." The pronouns shifted. "We replaced you one quiet afternoon and never gave it back." There were moments that should have been harmless but tasted like something else. For Father's Day, Elise arrived with a cake and a reusable shopping bag. She had that cheerful, managerial tone that made my grandchildren sit up straighter. "Dad," she said, "we brought you a few things to streamline life." Out came a label maker, a new shower mat, a stack of folders, and a fresh notebook in which she had already written passwords across the top line. Nick held up the notebook and smiled. "It is time to get modern, Walter," he said, tapping the cover like a teacher. Later, I found a page torn neatly from that same notebook. The words bank and mortgage were imprinted backward on the sheet below, as if someone had pressed too hard while practicing. At the dinner table, Lucy asked me whether I liked white sofas. She said the words carefully, as if she was sounding out a new book. "Mom says white makes a room feel bigger," she added, proud to repeat something important. I asked where she had seen the sofa. "On Mom's phone," she said. She said the word resale. She likes that word. Sam, who is 5, used my napkin as a cape and leaped from the second step of the back deck with a yell. When he landed, Elise winced and told him he had to play inside because the deck boards looked tired. Nick said he knew a guy who could replace the whole thing in a day for a song. I kept my face calm. The deck boards were the ones Helen and I had carried down from the truck ourselves in our 40s. They had held up everyone we loved. They did not look tired to me. The first time Elise said the word home out loud, as in, "Dad, we found a wonderful home for you, it is bright and friendly and there is a calendar of activities," I felt Helen's absence like a chair that had been kicked out from under me. My wife has been gone 2 years now. She used to fill the house with the smell of rosemary and lemon, and even in grief, the rooms felt like her hands were still pressed against their walls. After church, she would clip hydrangeas for the blue vase that sits in the front window. When grandchildren stayed over, she laid out quilts and a bowl of clementines and called the hallway nightlight, the lighthouse. The week Elise said home, I found Helen's gardening gloves in the mudroom where she had left them the last spring she was herself. I sat on the bench and held them until my fingers warmed the leather. In the same hour, Elise texted me a link to Brookside Terrace with 3 heart emojis and the line, "Respite care can be such a blessing." She followed it with a photo of my living room and a caption, "Imagine brightening this up." I could not bear the thought of leaving that, unless I was leaving on my own feet. They planned to set a white sofa in my living room and toast their new beginning with champagne. Instead, a detective stood on my porch and asked a question that turned my daughter's mouth to dust: "Who forged my name?" The afternoon Elise floated the word home for the first time, I made tea in my chipped blue mug and sat at the kitchen table with the sun on my knuckles. I called Porter. I had not seen her since the year Helen's estate settled, when she slid tissues across her desk without making a ceremony of it. Porter answered on the second ring. She listened. She did not fill the air with reassurance or outrage. When I finished, she said, "Come in at 4. Bring your deed, any powers of attorney, and your patience. We are going to do this clean." Her office is on the second floor of a brick building that smells like paper and old coffee. She had already laid out a yellow pad, 3 color-coded sticky flags, and a copy of our old estate plan. Helen's name in the header looked like a bruise. Porter tapped one clause with a pen. "This," she said, "is a springing power of attorney. You signed it 12 years ago when you were traveling more. It gives Elise authority if you are incapacitated. It was sensible then. It is dangerous now." "I am not incapacitated," I said. She nodded. "Which is why we get a capacity evaluation immediately. I want a letter from your doctor that says in plain language you understand your finances and can make your own decisions. We will revoke this power today. We will place your house into a living trust with you as beneficiary for life and a neutral trustee. We will move your bank accounts to payable on death for the grandchildren. We will change your mailing address to a P.O. box. We will keep your will, but the will almost not matter. I thought a will, I began. A will is dessert, she said. We are serving vegetables. She kept her face calm when I told her about the missing bills, the borrowed keys, the way Elise had started speaking in plurals about my life. When I mentioned Nick saying the word equity the way a man might say Paris, she wrote equity in block letters and circled it twice. People do not usually steal with ski masks, Walter, she said. They steal with paperwork. By evening, I had a list with times beside each task. At 8 the next morning, I sat in Dr. Nguyen's exam room pretending to read an old magazine. He came in with his sleeves rolled and that gentle kindness that makes a person in a white coat feel human. He asked me to remember 3 words, table, coin, apple, then to draw a clock with the hands at 11:10. I drew it slow and neat. He asked me what I would do if I found a stamped envelope on the ground. I said I would put it in a mailbox. He asked me to subtract 7 from 100 in a row until I ran out of 7s. I stopped before he asked. 79, I said, and he smiled like a man hearing a favorite song. When he signed the letter, he looked me in the eye. Do you need help beyond this? He asked. Safety at home? I need a paper shield, I said. And I need to know someone will stand near it if it bends. Then let the paper do its work, he said. And call me if you feel rushed or pushed. At 10 I sat across from Porter again. I signed the revocation of the power of attorney. I signed the deed transferring my house into the Walter L. Pierce Family Residence Trust. Porter had chosen the name so boring it was invisible. I appointed a trustee named Mayfield, a woman I know only as the former treasurer of the church across town, because Porter said a neutral person with a spine is better than a relative with a smile. We added a no contest clause. If anyone challenges the documents, they receive nothing. A hard net under my feet. At noon I went to the bank. Teresa at the branch knew me by the way I always ask for $100 in small bills for the grandchildren's envelopes. She spoke gently when she said, "There is an option to set accounts as payable on death, sir. Who would you designate?" I said the names Lucy and Sam out loud as if I were blessing them. She printed new cards for me to sign and slid me a booklet I would never read. If anything feels off, she said, call me directly. I do not care what time it is. I went home through the hardware store and bought a small, black pepper grinder that is not a pepper grinder. It came in a plain box with a 3-line instruction card. It sat on my counter with perfect manners and watched my kitchen as if it had always been there. I tested the feed from my laptop and saw myself lift my mug and rub my thumb along the crack in the handle, a habit Helen teased me about because she said I was searching for a way to polish something already clean. That weekend the family came for spaghetti. I set out the good plates because Sunday is Sunday no matter who plans to erase it. Elise arrived with grocery store flowers in a sleeve and placed them in Helen's blue vase without asking. Nick held court about a coworker's new outdoor kitchen. Stonework, gas line, the works, he said, aligning the knives in a row on the counter like he owned the room. Lucy asked if she could be the waitress and took my order in a serious whisper, bread, no butter, extra sauce. Sam crawled under the table and tied both our shoelaces together and laughed so hard he hiccuped. After dinner, Elise clicked her tongue at the pile of mail near the stairs. Dad, you cannot let things stack up, she said. It is how late fees happen. She swept the envelopes into her tote with the same movement she uses when cleaning up crayons at her house. One of the envelopes was from my insurer. I reached for it. She smiled and let it stay in the tote. I will call, she said. I have time tomorrow. Nick closed the lid of my laptop with 2 fingers and slid it farther from my chair. You rogue, he said, laughing with his teeth. We are going to get you modern whether you like it or not. On Tuesday, Elise arrived with a clipboard. She wore the tailored coat she uses for meetings, and she had a new tone, efficient compassion. We booked a trial stay at Brookside Terrace, she said. 3 days. Just to see. We have a tour and bingo, Dad. You will love it. She reached for my elbow like she was catching me from falling, though I was standing still. Let us at least see it, I said, and she smiled like she had taught me a lesson. Brookside Terrace smelled like Lysol and lemon bars. The lobby had a fireplace that pretended it burned wood and a bookcase full of books with their jackets intact. A woman at the desk called me dear 3 times and gave me a badge with my name in block letters. In the room they assigned me, there was a vinyl chair and a print of a boat I have never seen moored in any water that exists. A man down the hall coughed like a car with a bad belt. I unpacked my overnight bag, pajamas, razor, the letter from Dr. Nguyen, and my laptop. Elise kissed my cheek. We will bring a few of your things tomorrow, she said gently. So you feel at home. After the door clicked shut, I connected to the guest network. I sent 3 emails Porter had drafted with my exact punctuation. To the alarm company, codes will change today. New primary contact attached. To the locksmith, 2 new deadbolts installed today. Please text a photo of completed work. Payment on arrival. To Detective Morales, we met last fall at the library. I believe my daughter and son-in-law are preparing to exploit me financially. I have a recording device in my kitchen. If I send you what it captures, will you advise? I had kept Morales's card in the back of my wallet next to a photo Lucy took of me with jelly on my chin. Morales had spoken at the library about the gentle hands that take, about how often a nice voice and the word we mask at taking is care. She spoke without theatrics and made it clear she knew the difference between forgetfulness and fraud. At 4, my phone vibrated. Elise had texted a photo of my living room with the caption, thinking of brightening things up. Opinions? In the lower corner of the photo, on the edge of the counter, my pepper grinder watched. 39 minutes later, a file landed in my email. I put in earphones. The audio was grainy, the way kitchen sound is always a bowl of pebbles. There were footsteps and paper and Elise's voice, lighter than I had heard it in years. If the sofa comes Friday, we can take photos over the weekend, she said. Then list the dining set by Tuesday. Nick murmured something I could not catch. There was the soft clap of a hand against a countertop. Then Elise again, he signed a power of attorney ages ago. If we frame it right, this part is easy. Nick's voice floated up clean. Just copy his signature, he said. You have watched him sign your life for years. There was the sound of a pen. A check sliding against wood. A quick intake of breath as if someone had enjoyed the shape of a loop. I stared at the laptop screen until the small numbers in the corner meant something again. Then I forwarded the file to Detective Morales with a subject line Porter had dictated down to the comma, audio attached. Date and time visible in upper left. Potential forgery. Please advise. At 5:30, I called the bank and asked for Teresa. I could hear the clatter of a busy branch behind her, the sound of coins and people. I told her there might be a large credit card charge pending from a furniture store. She clicked keys like a person beating back a fire. I see a pending charge in the amount of $14,800 from Maison and Maine, she said. Would you like to dispute it? I would like to stop it, I said. I am at a facility I did not choose while someone shops with my name. Understood, she said, and the firmness in her voice made me want to sit up straighter. I am freezing the card and flagging the account. You will need to present identification in person to unfreeze, but the charge will not clear. I slept almost not at all. At 2 in the morning a cart squeaked down the hall. At 4 someone somewhere cried for someone else. I lay on the narrow bed and recited the names of the teachers I hired over 30 years until my brain was a list. At 7 I signed out. The woman at the desk told me there would always be a place for me when I was ready to come back. I said thank you in a voice that did not sound like my own. At 9, I was at Teresa's counter with my driver's license. She printed a fraud report while I stared at the plant on her desk and tried to decide if it was alive. We see this, she said softly, as if talking about weather. We see this a lot. At 10, the locksmith texted a photo of 2 new deadbolts shining like coins. He left the old ones on the counter and a receipt with a crooked tear. At 10:30, Detective Morales called. I will meet you at your house at 11, she said. Do not go in. Wait outside. If they arrive, do not engage. Yes, ma'am, I said, and the teacher in me fell into line. I stood on the public side of my hedge with the morning sun on my shoulders. A blue jay landed on my mailbox and screamed at nothing. A moving truck rounded the corner with the slow assurance of something that knows it will be needed. Elisa's car slid in behind it, clean and white. Nick sat in the passenger seat, checking his hair in the visor mirror. They were smiling the way people smile when they are about to say the word finally. Elise got out with her tote and her clipboard. She walked to my door with keys that flashed. She tried the first key, then the second. When nothing turned, she laughed, high and bright, and said, "Well, that is interesting." Nick took his turn. The mover stood with his hands on his hips like a man deciding whether to bill for waiting time. A sedan pulled up behind them and stopped. Morales stepped out. She wore plain clothes and shoes made for standing. Her badge flashed once and disappeared. She walked up my path with a steady, unsurprised pace. "Elise Pierce," she said. Elise turned, and something complicated moved across her face. She put one hand on the doorknob as if to steady herself. "Yes. I am Detective Morales with the county. I would like to talk to you about a financial matter regarding your father." She tilted her head toward where I stood at the hedge. "Mr. Pierce, would you join us?" Nick lifted his palms. "Detective, this is a family situation. We are just trying to help an elderly parent downsize responsibly." "We can discuss verbs later," Morales said evenly. "For now, I would like to know when your father signed this document." She held up a photocopy of the power of attorney Elise had fished out of my file cabinet a week earlier. There were faint smudges on the margin where someone's hand had rested while copying. "Last week," Elise said. Her voice was level, but I could hear the breath behind it. "Interesting," Morales replied. "Because your father's physician signed a capacity letter last week stating that your father is perfectly competent. And because we have an audio recording from yesterday in which a male voice says, 'Just copy his signature,' immediately before a check is written for a high-dollar purchase. Would you like to hear it?" Nick started to speak, but Morales held up a hand without looking at him. "Sir, you will have a chance." Elisa's eyes found mine. For a moment, we were not a detective and a suspect's father and a man with a badge. We were a woman who once cut hydrangeas with her mother and a man who still keeps the vase on the sill. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Dad, she said, and there was an old sound in that word. Dad, this is not what you think. What I think, I said quietly, is that I am not moving out of my house because you want a sofa you cannot keep jam on. The mover coughed, surprised into a noise. Nick's jaw worked like he was chewing a seed. Morales's face did not change. There are civil and criminal paths here, Morales said. Today, I am going to take statements and I am going to advise you not to access your father's accounts again. There will be a court date. In the meantime, you will have no contact without his permission. If you violate that, I will arrest you. Do you both understand? Elise nodded. Nick stared at a point over Morales's shoulder like a man trying to remember a door code. That afternoon, Porter filed for a protective order and an injunction. A judge signed a temporary order before his lunch got cold. 2 days later we sat in a courtroom that smelled like pencils and dust and the patience of clerks. Elise wore gray. She had hired a lawyer with a haircut that said expensive. Nick stood in the back with his hands in his pockets as if he could not quite believe a room existed where his posture did not matter. Porter arranged our papers in a stack that would have made Helen proud. On top was the deed to the trust. Below it, the revocation of the power of attorney. Dr. Nguyen's letter. Teresa's fraud report noting the reverse charge from Maison and Maine. A transcript of the kitchen audio with the time stamp in the corner like a watchful eye. The judge read longer than I expected. When he looked up, his expression had the tired kindness of a person who has seen this 40 times and knows it will not be the last. Miss Pierce, he said, you will return any keys and documents belonging to your father immediately. You will not access or attempt to access his accounts. You will not make purchases in his name. Mr. Kinney, you will not be on Mr. Pierce's property without his written permission. If either of you violates this order, I will consider contempt sanctions and refer the matter to the district attorney. Do you understand? Elisa's voice failed her on the first try. On the second, she said, yes, Your Honor. Nick did not speak. He stared at a spot on the wood-paneled wall as if he could will it to open. When we left the courtroom, Elise lingered in the hallway with the look of a person trying to pick up a cup that has already shattered. Dad, she said, can we talk? Not today, I said. Not without Porter. She nodded too fast. She said she understood. She said she was sorry. Her eyes were dry and then they were not. At home, I made the house loud again. On Wednesdays, the American Legion men come over and set up chess boards on the dining room table. They bring thermoses and stories, and their laughter fits in the beams like a hand in a glove. On Saturdays, Lucy and Sam arrive with backpacks and cereal they insist tastes better at Grandpa's house. We make pancakes and flip them with the bravado of circus performers. Lucy sprinkles powdered sugar like snow. Sam insists that every pancake needs a window and uses a biscuit cutter to prove it. When they spill, we wipe it up. We do not use coasters. We do not apologize to furniture. I walked the perimeter with the locksmith and installed a camera above the garage and a new light at the back door. I changed the account passwords and sealed them in a folder in a safe deposit box. I wrote a letter to Elise with Porter reading over my shoulder. In it I said I loved her. I said love without trust is a boat without a bottom. I said I would meet her for coffee in a public place with Porter present, and that if she wanted to rebuild, we could, slowly, with boundaries. I said the house would not be sold while I live, that I will assign no one the right to spend my money, and that if she pressed me again, the next conversation would not be with me. I added a clause to the trust at Porter's suggestion: any beneficiary who exerts undue influence or challenges the plan loses their share. The money for Lucy and Sam went into a subtrust with milestones that look like real life: trade school or college, a reliable car, a deposit on a home if they have saved their own portion, braces for children not yet born. The money for Elise, if any remains after my doctor and the American Legion men and the plow guy and the woman who trims the hydrangeas, is conditioned on her not trying to take what is not hers again. One evening, after the leaves started to turn and the creek ran low, Elise stood on my porch with a small bouquet she must have bought at the market. She did not ring the bell. She just stood, the way people stand at hospital doors when they are not sure they are wanted. Lucy, who was coloring at my table, looked up and said, "Mom is here." I opened the door. Elise held out the flowers and said hello like the word itself was a long walk. "We can start with hello," I said. "And we can keep the door open." We talked about school. We talked about how Sam cannot tie his shoes because he likes the laces free. We did not talk about white sofas. When she left, she touched the banister without thinking. Her hand found the smooth place Helen wore in the wood. She looked at me like a person recognizing a photograph of themselves as a child. "I remember that," she whispered. At night, I walked the hallway and touched the wall the way you tap a sleeping dog so it knows you are there. I say goodnight to the blue vase like a fool because fools often sleep better. I set the pepper grinder back on the counter because it belongs there now, the same way caution belongs to memory. I do not forget what almost happened. I do not forget what did. If anyone asks why I made it difficult, why I called a detective on my own child, I will answer the way I answered on the sidewalk with the moving truck idling and the hedge at my back. Because this is my house. And because I am still here.
Greetings, and thanks for spending your time with us today. I truly hope you enjoyed the video. I want to wish you a peaceful day or a restful evening, wherever you may be. Take care, and we'll see you next time.